second night for final presentations from applicants for this year's CPC funding cycle, which will be applicable fiscal year 2021. Does anybody have any announcements they want to make before we get started on the presentations? Deirdre, can you come to the mic?
Hi, Deirdre Anderson, 31 Old Colony Road, here tonight on behalf of the Hingham Historical Society. In our application, I have a supplement to follow on our presentation last night that I would like to distribute to each of the committee members. It's okay? Thanks.
Give it to one person and we'll pass it around. Great, thanks. Any other announcements? Okay, so why don't we get started with our first presentation, which is the Inner Harbor Master Plan, and Alan Perrault will be presenting.
Good evening. Thank you for having us, especially first on the agenda. I'm here representing the trustees. Ed Johnson of the fellow trustee is here. Chris Daly is going to be helping us with the PowerPoint. We worked on it today. Bruce McAloney from Harbor Development is here. Bill is away, so Bruce is the vice chair, and he's handling those duties. So Bruce and I are going to be the presenters, essentially. Is that PowerPoint ready to go?
I don't know how to get it to project.
I guess I'd like to see if we can figure this out. We'll be the first ones, I guess.
Do you know how to get them in?
I've got the presentation up, but I don't know how to project it.
It doesn't look like that's on. Is there a remote next to it that might be able to turn
Yeah,
it on?
maybe the power on.
Where was the grandchild when you needed it?
Exactly. Or in Chris's case, a child. For you, you and me.
Yeah, it should be on our screen. It probably just takes a minute or two to warm up.
We have good coffee.
Not this whole evening hinges on you.
Yeah, I know.
Good 19 seconds.
Oh, yeah, here you go.
It's going.
It's happening.
Well done.
Thank you. Can we dim these lights a little bit? I guess not. Can we dim them in a way that, how visible is this? Let's see. If it's visible enough, we don't have to. Okay, good. Again, thank you for having us. Just as a quick background to our slide, is remember when we were here in November, I think it was middle of November, at the time we were looking for a vision that was planning and programmatic. It was kind of a program component and a planning update of the 2007 master plan, which was originally funded by this committee. And as your chairman in particular always, and the committee as a whole says, is try wherever you can to get additional funding or seek funding where you can to make your dollars go further. And at the time, I think we mentioned the fact we thought there may be an opportunity to get money from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, which themselves has their own planning and graphic capabilities. We had a meeting with them. The letter that was submitted to them for an application is what you have with you. They're creating a sustaining vision for Hingham. You can probably go to that first slide, I guess, Chris. There. So that's just a summary. You actually have the letter, which is, as required, was signed by the town administrator on behalf of the Board of Selectmen as well. So this is kind of and just so you know, that application is on the planning side is a little more global than we had originally looked at. We were looking at the Inner Harbor, which is the focus of the 2007 master plan, and I think we agreed that certainly going into the downtown made a lot of sense. We've always talked about linkage between the two, and this plan that we had application we submitted to MAPC for consideration did include that. So it went up to North Street, Station Street, and also has a very important potential linkage with the shipyard as far as having maybe bus service or trying to get a link between that, which has been talked about, a multimodal link that would be a benefit to this entire area. So those are all parts of this proposal. We've heard through Mary Dunham, the town planner, Mary Savage Dunham, verbally that they are looking favorably upon that application. Now, we're not going to have, I think we submitted the letter December 12th or something. We're probably not going to have a formal response from them until the end of January, beginning of February. But what we decided to do is we reworked our proposal on the premise that we would get that money. And so what we're now looking at in this proposal is really the programmatic side. Because I think the thing we have to stress to this committee beyond, and I may mention when we met with MAPC and did a site walk, they were actually quite impressed with how many things the town of Hingham had already done. The Whitney Wharf Bridge, the boardwalk, the community room and the snack stand building. So I think they were impressed that we were further along than a lot of communities they work with. So we physically have done some things that some of their other communities haven't. So this proposal is really to work more on the infrastructure we have. What can we sustain in the way of programs and activities down the harbor and continue the momentum we have based on the facilities we have? So with that, I think you can show the next slide, Chris, the projects we've completed. So you all know what we've done, but a very, very important consideration is the lower left-hand corner. To me, the biggest game changer we have from past years is having the new snack stand restrooms in a community room. The biggest peeve, and Bob Mosher and I know this when we were back in harbor development 11, 12 years ago, we didn't have any sewer lines on this entire side of the harbor. So a big expense of this was running the sewer all the way to Red Eye Roasters to make this building. There's a lot of physical improvements beyond what you see in this building, running a water line, a gas line, a sewer line. All that infrastructure has been done. Now we have working restrooms. Now we have a place you can have meetings. So the things, and in the process of doing the study, we found out that the trustees' property really kind of goes over to where the gazebo is. So we can start looking at programs as a town and as the trustees that incorporates that land, knowing we have a building, and we pick up additional parking. So I think you know all the other things. It continues to show the work that's been done with Hingham Maritime, the pedestrian bridge, and the like. So the goals and objectives of our initiative are on the next slide. So we want to complement, again, being optimistic, the future MAPC plan, the ongoing master plan that is being overseen by the planning board, the Route 3A corridor project, but with a more granular implementation strategy for projects and programs we can kind of do now that will not conflict with those other initiatives. And to do this, I think we need to do almost what we did when we did the Harbor Task Force that I was on with members of the planning board and the Board of Selectmen and the Bathing Beach trustees to incorporate. I think we have to at least gain the input and get the comments of all these groups, whether it's the Board of Selectmen because of jurisdiction, HDC because with ourselves are the ones who generally deal with these waterfront things. We're near the waterfront, so it's Concom, it's planning, it's building, it's zoning. Police and fire, we're going to have impacts of any programs we run as far as whether they need police details. Recreation, we see a real opportunity to expand a lot of recreation opportunities that we just scratched the surface of. The harbor master, obviously, oversees security down there. The Maritime Center, we got to be cognizant of that. We'll be working with DPW, engineering and the like. HGIC for that whole downtown link. So I think the thing is with this is to identify projects and programs that will further activity opportunities, whether they be cultural or recreational. And some of them are active and passive, and I think it's important when you look at a waterfront that I appreciate both sides of recreation. I think some people are going to be on one side or the other, but I think we have to be cognizant we have an equal amount of passive and active recreation facilities. Next slide, I guess, Chris. So what are we talking about as far as priorities? So we're looking at things as practical as, trash and recycling receptacles. Some of them, are they solar? Are solar ones worth it or not? I want the input of DPW and saying, okay, for the amount of time we're using it, is the delta of buying one versus the other? So if you notice in the bottom, every one of those things that are listed, what's the right location? What's the right type for that application? What does it cost? And by cost, I also mean the cost to buy it, but the cost to maintain it. Which you're not going to get in a plan that's done by MAPC. It's rightly so. That's not what they get into. So those are just examples. The sign on the upper left is one of the ones that Bruce worked on. with harbor development, where they, if you've seen those interpretive signs, they're outstanding. The one on the right is an example I found of a kiosk. That happens to be an electronic one, where you're not stuck with whatever's on it. It could be up to date, so if you had special events, you could actually highlight them on that, and that has somewhat of a shade structure over it. And that's just a concept in the lower right-hand corner of benches, I think, in what you could do. The next thing is just physical structures. We have the land right now if we want to do a play area. We talked with Vicki and Recreation, 3 years ago, about the idea of maybe having a small play area that is an adjunct to the beach. We clearly have the land area to do it. The drawback before was you didn't have a restroom. So if you went there with your kids, you had no place for them to go. I mean, let's be practical. And I also think that's a good synergy with the snack stand. I mean, if you go down there, you've got a place to get food, very much like Sullivan's in Castle Island. So I think we're looking at exercise and play areas. The lower right-hand corner is like, senior exercise areas or workout stations. We've talked about the idea of is there a right place to do a bocce court. The middle one I think is important. How do we optimize the community room? We certainly see it as a place. We've already started to talk with Rec about doing daytime programs. Situate in there last year had 75 times they rented their function room. And one of the other important considerations of this is you remember when we got the supplemental money from town meeting a couple of years ago, $350,000, the trustees have an obligation to pay that back. And so the more things we can do that make these things successful is going to increase the chance we can pay it back. So for the money we're asking, the $30,000 we're asking, I'm saying that goes a long way towards optimizing our ability to repay the town. And all I'm saying, and this is a placeholder in the bottom, we'd be working with Ken Corson, but the state probably, it could be within the time the MAPC is doing this study, or certainly within the next year, is probably doing a new boat ramp and a float. And I think it's just to have the input of how the walkway goes across it, the state's going to have to do it, that's part of the process. So then on the next page, we just talk about some of the programs and activities. We had this slide before. And if you look at other communities, they do a lot more with their big space, whether it's running road races or walks to benefit Alzheimer's or you're having outdoor band concerts. Most communities that have a gazebo will do a band concert. We have a number of musical and choral groups in the town. I think we just haven't had the right facilities for them. And again, we didn't have a restroom. So if you're going to have an idea like that and you're going to have a nighttime thing, throws off business to him. If he's the only food vendor and we don't let anyone else come in, that's business for him, income for us. And so I think we just want to look at ways of maximizing the waterfront, analyzing like farmers markets, craft fairs, things like that could happen here that we've never looked at before. So that in a nutshell is that. Next slide, Chris. So this is what the ask is in a nutshell. We're looking for $30,000 in CPA funding. In the past, we were around 65 to 70. We think the $30,000 is enough for us to get a planning program consultant to work with our overall group, which isn't just us, but it's those other players we were talking about. That would be essentially the point person. When we did the Harbor Task Force, for example, Katie Lacey was essentially our resource, and Katie could do all these things and do the research in between meetings we have. And that's kind of what I see this person doing, that we would meet as a person or a small firm, that we would get a collective group and maybe come up with a nucleus committee of sorts, and that we would have this person as a resource to do the research that it's not really reasonable to think we can do it as volunteers. I mean, we all do it, every one of you does it, but I think to do it professionally, I think we need someone who can do a broader search of programs that have happened elsewhere, that are transferable to here. We could help the Maritime Center. What are the good examples Duxbury has done, which has a very successful Maritime Center? What are other function rooms like Situate or, all these type of things? What type of events have they done? As I mentioned before, Burlington, Vermont has got a very aggressive program. They're 1.5 times the size of us, and I know they're bigger, but still, they sustain a very big waterfront program with activities, half the year there. We could have a polar plunge down there. I'm not going in, but somebody might. But again, we'd have a restroom, and you could have prom night there. There's a lot of activities that we do or could do with this type of, with this available. So I see the end product being we'd get reports and recommendations for specific recreational programs and physical structures that would have special event opportunities that say you should consider all these. And I think we'd have some money, maybe about $5,000 for some printed materials as an end result. Whether it's a simple flyer, whether it's just a report that is a starting point. And I don't think this is something that's going to, fund a bocce court, but it's going to say other communities of our size have them. And we find this is the demographic that uses that. And the same thing with the play area. What's an appropriate play area for this? Not something like the play area that's behind Town Hall, but what works in this location. And again, I think we need some help identifying that. Not dissimilar to what Rec did last year in the sense that they're having multiple users of their play areas. And the same thing with us. We have to look at the cost. If we start getting more activity down there, I want Randy Sylvester's input as far as like, okay, what are your resources to sustain that? And what is that going to cost us to do that? So I probably talked too much, but do you have any other things to add?
So when we first came in, we came in with 3 quotes, soup to nuts, for a strategic harbor plan at $75,000. In the discovery process, we MAPC came to in the front of the discussion, and we broke it off into a long-term plan. What can we do? We may or may not get MAPC to work with us. That's a risk that we're willing to work through and take. But what do we do now? Because MAPC is going to be a time period before it's something actionable. This current ask is something that's actionable now, that we can turn a jewel like the harbor within Hingham into something that's productive. But what is productive? What do we do? There's a list of things that you could possibly do, and the ask is for, let's go find out what those important things are.
I have a question.
Yep.
Can you give us a little detail, since you're involved with this ask for MAPC? So let's pretend we get the grant. Can you give us an idea what the grant is? And is the town putting any money toward that? So often, sometimes, the town gives X and the grant is Y. How much do you have any
So
idea?
MAPC, my understanding, it's not money.
Okay.
It's they're going to come in and tell you what to do and how to do it. And Hingham puts money in every single year.
To
It's
MAPC.
To
not
MAPC.
this.
Okay.
So
And
it's
'cause
now
it looks
it's
like
our
it's a
opportunity
6-month
to use
time
it.
frame. So what if you had to put a value on it? Is there a value, or we don't?
Oh, I think especially going into the downtown area, Vicky, as well as looking at the linkage thing, it's probably worth $75,000 all day, and by itself.
And more.
And more. I mean, somebody might pay almost $100,000 with the transportation linkage and the downtown, and how you're gonna get, we've talked about, and Judy knows, the synergy between downtown and the waterfront forever. We just haven't, and it's not that people haven't worked at it, but I mean, I think it needs a little more work.
Right.
So I think it's a great resource, and they have in-house capabilities, because they service, I forget how many communities, but they haven't done a lot for Hingham in the past. I'm not saying that in a negative way, we just haven't tapped them that often. So I think because the fact we haven't, they would like to work with us, and I think they see us as being more prepared than somebody else might be. Again, what we've already done is a plus to them, because at least they're not starting with a blank slate. But no out-of-pocket money from Hingham at all.
The town isn't giving any money toward this? Okay.
None.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yep.
Who's our liaison to this project? Do you have any questions? Can you just speak into the
My
mic?
only question is, are you saying you're only asking now 30,000?
Correct. Yeah, because we think what we're looking to do, and again, it's gonna count on a lot of us giving input to whoever this consultant is. We're not gonna just say, here, come back and tell us. I mean, I'm looking for a lot of input, and, the person then doing the work in between, meeting with groups like ourselves.
I think it's great that you worked with Mary to get other help for this and were able to bring down your ask. It really helped CPC spread the love, and you did good, hard work to find money from elsewhere to take your ask down, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and we feel strongly that we don't want to lose the next year in implementing programs. I mean, it's taken us a long time, and trust me, a lot of my time in particular, working to get this bathhouse built. But we're at the, 1 yard line on that now, so it's going to be open this spring. And now we're trying to get our arms around, we've been meeting, Chris, Ed, and I, and like, okay, let's get this function room's going to be, ready come May or June. We've got to get our arms around that. But it just opens so many other opportunities outside of that building that I think we should be running with those, because if it's not this year, certainly by 2021, I'd like to see a much more active program along the whole waterfront.
I just have a question. bathing beach. So you just said that the trustees owe the town $350,000.
That was the idea, that to the best of our ability, we're supposed to repay that over time.
And where does your revenue come from?
The snack stand in the function room.
So what I see as a bit of a crossover here is that this $30,000 benefits the trustees in a big way because it's meant to generate revenue for them. This application is from the Harbor Development Committee. Shouldn't they
and
be
the trustees.
It's a joint application.
They are.
Oh, it is
It
joint.
is a joint
Oh, okay,
application.
so I'm sorry. So,
Yeah.
good, okay, so
And
they
we
should be.
meet jointly a lot anyway. And Chris and I came from Harbor Development to the Bathing Beach trustees. So
So it's really kind
there's a
of
real synergy between our
A
groups.
blended thing. It just felt funny that
No,
that the entity owes the town money, but it's a
yeah,
funny
but we cross
relationship.
over all the way. I mean, there's not a single person who knows where the land of the Bathing Beach trustees begins. They don't even know who we are, for the most part. I mean,
So it's a good
realistically.
working relationship.
Correct.
Okay. And why, my other second question is, why break off only the planning part? Why not do this part also in conjunction with the downtown? Like last night, the Historical Society talked a lot about creating a cultural district from the harbor to Old Ship. Why wouldn't this kind of project be done on that scope also?
If you look at our list of people, we have the HGIC in there too. So we certainly see ourselves working with the downtown group as well. I mean,
But the study area is only the harbor.
no, not really. This is we don't have much area to do programmatic stuff on that side. I mean, that's why I'm saying we have a lot of raw land on the waterfront. Between our parking lot, the Grove, the gazebo parcel, there's open space. It's a blanker slate than the downtown. And we'd be happy to work. I've wanted to do that for years. So, I mean, clearly they can have input, but Bruce had another thing to add.
So
on that.
MAPC effort is not just for the bathing beach and
Right.
the inner harbor right now. That's the overall strategic planning on what we do and how we integrate downtown with the bathing beach and over to the shipyard. The ask now for the CPC is what can we do with the land now in the inner harbor that we can start using programs now. MAPC, a year and a half out, probably have more development, more asks, more requirements. But right now, let's utilize what we have, and how do we utilize it? That's what the ask is for.
And when I use Burlington as an example, I think I mentioned it the last time that I was here, I had just been up there about 2 weeks prior. And if you look at their little section folded little thing, it links their downtown and programs they have in their downtown. So if you had Hingham Harbor Days or downtown, you could have, maybe if you were having the food festival we have, why couldn't that linger and go over onto the harbor side? So I think by all means we'd be open to that idea.
I just think it's really important that this be
Yeah.
coordinated with the Downtown Association because they do so many programmatic things on dues without grants from CPC, and so it would be hard for them to kind of feel like like this wasn't part of their effort also.
Well, one of our biggest supporters of us getting our money was Sue Sullivan, so Sue's the one that immediately
Right,
pitched in.
but she's not the Downtown Association.
I know, but I mean, I think and we also have a little plug in there about where do we get support from the private sector, and how do we link with the private? There was a bullet point on that too, and I know we've talked about that even along the 3A corridor. So, which the town hasn't really done a whole lot of,
Right. And just a public service announcement, if anybody watching or listening has not been to the harbor recently,
Right.
they should go, because on our site visit, we saw really just tremendous improvements in the walkway, the historic signs, the bath, I mean, really, it goes on, and it's a beautiful place to
Yeah,
be.
we're just
So,
getting there, and
thank you.
to me, let's not lose any momentum in the next year. I think that's the important thing that I'd like to stress.
Any other questions or comments, either from the committee or on the floor?
Do you have any consultants bidding for this?
No, because we've only, Dan, we've only pared this down very recently. So it's a little bit of a different animal in the sense that this isn't a landscape architect or an engineer. I mean, it's going to be more of a planner who gets into specific programming. So I think we're gonna have to do an outreach, and that was one of the bullet points that Chris put in our thing today, that's the first thing we get our group together is like, okay, let's come up with our RFP, and who fits that standard. I mean, clearly other communities have done these things, and they had help with somebody. Who are those people, you know?
Others? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is Mark Thorell for the fixing of the tennis courts at the Plymouth River School. Jim, you need to speak into the mic. Jim, you need to speak into the mic. The microphone.
My only question was whether the responses that we saw a little while ago to the RFP were all the ones, or will there be more when you're reviewing firms?
So the RFP before was a full turnkey plan. We went to the existing person who did it in 2007, plus the two others that gave us. There will be others that come back who have done it for other communities.
So this is a new and expanded search.
So the respondents will be an expanded search. We won't just go to the three.
Excuse me.
Good evening, Mark Thorell, Recreation Director. Thank you for inviting me here tonight to present the Rec Commission's proposal to fund the resurfacing of the Rec Department's tennis courts at the Plymouth River School. Just a quick recap of our proposed project. The Hingham Rec tennis courts located at Plymouth River School are extremely popular and heavily used from May through October. Over the years, hundreds of feet of linear cracking has appeared on the asphalt courts. The significant cracking not only hurts gameplay, but is also a safety concern. We are hoping to fix the cracking by renovating the court surface by applying a right-way membrane. The right-way crack repair system uses exclusive technology to waterproof existing cracks with an overlay membrane. This overlay membrane allows the existing cracks to move without breaking the system. The town of Hingham is presently in the middle of conducting an athletic field and outdoor court study. However, the Rec Commission feels a sense of responsibility to provide safe courts to the Hingham community. Some of the cracks have become so large that by next spring could start to become unsafe. Weston and Sampson, the firm that is leading the charge on the athletic field and court study, is aware of the Rec Commission's proposal and have assured us that they would not recommend repurposing the tennis courts because they are heavily used courts and the site is not conducive for any other sport. Weston and Sampson's one question was about the solution to fix the cracks. Longer-term solutions include milling off the top inch of pavement, which costs $250,000. An even longer-term solution involves removing all the pavement and repaving the entire court. This is a cost of $350,000. I without question firmly believe the smart choice is to proceed with the short-term solution by utilizing the right-way process. The Hingham High School tennis courts were finished in 2012 with the same right-way process. Although they have had a few small patch jobs over the last 7 years, the courts, for the most part, have lasted the full 7 years. We appreciate your consideration. Certainly open it up to any questions.
Anybody?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So my question is with regards to the maintenance of the courts. Have these cracks previously been repaired, sealed, anything?
No, they have not. No.
So this is the first that they'd be treated for?
Yes.
Anybody on the floor? Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Next up for the Second Parish Clock Tower is Lisa Shetty and Jane Shute.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lisa Shetty, 175 East Street, and this is Jane Shute.
427 Gardner.
And we're both on the leadership board at Second Parish and on the committee for this project for the clock tower restoration. We don't really have any updates since the last time we presented, so this will be just a review. When we conducted the CPC site visit, we showed you the 4 historic buildings that are located on the property. So it's the church or the sanctuary, the hearse house, the parsonage, and the barn. So the tower project began when we were investigating the source of water damage to the ceiling over the balcony inside the sanctuary. The problem was determined to be gaps in the aging columns in the bell tower. And so we tried 2 different fixes with that with no luck. And so we conducted an exhaustive search for a capable and skilled steeplejack. And we found Bob Coteau of Heritage Steeplejack and Construction to conduct the necessary repairs. So we asked him to give us an assessment of the entire steeple, which includes the bell tower or the belfry where the problem columns are located, the clock tower, which includes 4 clocks and the apex over the vestibule, all of which were too high for our painter, who had recommended we hire a steeplejack for painting those areas anyway. Since the steeplejack would already be there to do the repairs, it seemed to be more cost-effective to do that work while all his staging and scaffolding was in place. So we included in our grant proposal a detailed estimate of the work, which I believe you all have in the original packet. So we've already invested significantly in the repair work and painting of the bell tower. The amount requested represents less than 1/3 of the overall cost of the steeple project. And to date, we have completed the necessary repairs and painting to the bell tower. Still remaining is restoration of the clock faces and sanding and painting of the clapboards of the clock tower and the apex over the vestibule. So we are only requesting CPC funds for the restoration of the clock faces, and Jane has a chart so that you can
So you could see this.
break that down a little bit more.
You can see the 4 parts of the project, the bell tower being up here with the guardrail. Then there's the clock tower, and the apex of the church is this triangle here. And what we're asking for is just the clock faces. When Bob Coteau went up and actually saw them, they rotted. And we did spend money, you did, through the selectmen, to repair the mechanisms of the clock, but now the back of the clock is falling apart. So this is the part, I'm sorry, I am not holding this right for you. This is the part that we're asking for, the clock faces. Now, this belfry up here was a $47,000 project. The clocks would be a $32,000. The painting the clock tower, after the clocks are repaired, we would take care of painting the clapboards around it. That's a $16,500, and then the apex is $11,000. So that's a review of the whole project is $106,000, and that's why we broke it up into 4 parts, because we really couldn't afford the whole project as a church.
We believe that we can fundraise the money necessary to paint the clapboards of the clock tower, the apex, but we will not be able to cover the cost of the restoration of the clock faces at this time, given the money necessary to spend on repairs of the bell tower to prevent further water damage. We're a small congregation, and we've already asked members to donate towards several other maintenance projects. So in regards to timing, further delay in restoration of the clock faces may lead to further deterioration, as all faces have significant weather exposure and age, and further deterioration could affect the currently working mechanism of the clocks, and subsequently the cost of the work could go up. It was difficult to find a skilled steeplejack, so we did, as I mentioned, we had a couple other people who attempted repairs to solve our problem, and it was only when we landed on this 3rd guy that he was the one that not could only correctly diagnose but correctly repair the problem. So we have a lot of confidence in him. And so with delay, there's no guarantee how much longer he would be in business. I mean, he is getting up there. It's hard to find people that are willing to.
There aren't too many people that want to be steeplejacks.
No. So, part of our ask is just part of our sense of responsibility that as good stewards of the 4 historical structures of Second Parish that we're responsible for, is that we want to do the necessary work right, and we want to do it well so that the next generation of caretakers has a good roadmap to handle necessary maintenance and future projects. So we thank you for your consideration. Does anybody have any questions?
Anyone? Anyone on the floor? And just tell us, and also the folks at home, remind us, what year is the church from?
1642.
1742.
1742. I'm sorry.
Okay.
1742.
100 years.
What's 100 years, give or take? Okay. Thank you both so much.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is supposed to be the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust, and I thought I saw Britton walking back and forth outside. But why don't we skip to the construction documents for the pool sited at the Country Club, and hopefully while we're having that piece of discussion, Britton and Tim will come in and we can talk about affordable housing. So I think Christine Smith is going to present. Are you going to come up with Kevin Whalen? And Bill? Okay, great. Yeah.
Well, it's starting off easier than the last time. This didn't work for a little bit the last time. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for hosting us tonight. I'm Christine Smith, Chairman of the Country Club Management Committee, joined by Kevin Whalen, who is the Executive Director. This presentation will look similar in sort of visually to previous presentation that we made back in November, with one nice difference. When we were before you in November, we were asking for $3,050,000. Tonight, we're only asking for $500,000, which is a nice, in some aspects, it's a nice change of events. Basically, the reason being for the change is twofold. One, we were moving forward with some fundraising aspect for the pool project, and that wasn't going quickly enough to be able to enable us to bring what we felt was the best project forth at the upcoming town meeting, coupled with the fact that we had the South Shore Country Club pool is closed indefinitely. It's basically failed. And because the pool is primarily the ceiling above our maintenance facility, we felt that we really needed to focus on the maintenance facility repairs first and then move on to the pool. So those are sort of two basic reasons. Just to back up for a little bit, Bill, can you go back to the previous page with the picture? So just for the benefit of people at home, we've been hearing about this pool project for quite a while. And if you'll see, Bill will get back to the beginning photo. Just a bit of history. Back in 2017, town meeting did approve $75,000 of feasibility study money to help us look at the fact that we knew that we were going to have to replace the pool. If you look at the picture before you, since that time, it's rolled into a master plan. Hingham is great at master planning, and we felt that with myself being new to the Country Club Management Committee and a new executive director, we need to take a look at the entire facility. And so you'll see that that picture, if you look at the sort of the upper in the middle, that's the proposed site for the new pool, which is where the existing tennis court is. Then you can see the main building, sort of the two triangular pieces. It looks like a putting green down below that, which is where the existing pool structure is now. We're talking about removing that and relocating it to the new site where the tennis court was previously. And then down below, you'll see sort of a pro shop / maintenance facility. So this is part of a larger plan, and I think there's been some, sort of frustration on the part of some people, perhaps, that this hasn't moved as quickly, but we wanted to make sure we were being good stewards of the town and the country club to make sure that we can actually pay for the things that need to be done up there. And as we sort of made our way down that timeline, you sort of quickly come to the conclusion that about 80% of the revenue generated from the country club comes from the golf. And that is why we sort of, stepped back, took a look at it and said, what we're going to be doing is changing up this project a bit. Instead of building, which is initially a very large indoor-outdoor pool facility, we're going to be building a smaller seasonal pool facility with the ability to use fundraising dollars to make it a year-round facility with perhaps a bubble. So that's sort of, just a bit of background and why you're seeing that master plan picture that you see before you. Bill, you want to go to the next slide? And Kevin, you can jump in whenever you want. I don't, it's a lot of information, so I don't want to be too redundant. But basically, the benefit to the town is this meets open space recreational use as well as historic preservation. This benefits all segments of the Hingham community. Proceeds are being used for a town-owned property, and I think that's very important. As this town took on, the CPA surcharge, there really was a real focus on those dollars being reinvested in the town of Hingham, things that are town-owned properties that people have already been taxed on. It's a nice use of tax dollars. And as you can see, it's part of a larger master plan. And so tonight's $500,000 ask, the proceeds will be used for the design and construction documents for a new town pool that's located at the South Shore Country Club. And so our plan would be to be before people at town meeting this year with CPC design funding, if you give us the thumbs up for that appropriation, as well as the country club would come to town meeting with a South Shore Country Club Turf Care Center, which is the new maintenance facility. In terms of fundraising, people have asked, as of the end of the year, all the donations have been returned by the Friends. Checks were received. There will be a fundraising component moving forward for the seasonal aspect of a year-round facility. And people were very supportive. I think the main reason that the fundraising didn't go as well as we thought is that most people felt that the town should pay for the pool. The town owns a pool now, and people felt that the tax base should pay for that pool. The project will be a new 8-lane outdoor pool with a splash pad, bathroom locker facilities, a spectator area, built to accommodate a year-round bubble. Estimated cost approximately $7 million, and we're hopeful that with a year-round pool, we'll be able to host the high school swim meets. We'll relocate the pool to the current tennis court site, and we'll be looking to move those tennis courts towards the front of the facility. The existing pool will be demolished and repurposed as part of the master plan, as you saw previously. The country club operation will finance the construction of the new turf care center, and town meeting will be asked to finance the construction of the new town pool facility in 2021.
I think, a couple things on the placement of the pool. It's important, I think, just to segregate where the uses are, because currently where the pool is, it's where the golf is and a lot of traffic is. So I think by moving the tennis court, the pool over to the tennis courts, it has its own parking area over there. There's not as much traffic. It'll be, people will be parking right in front of the pool, kind of separate the two uses on the footprint of the facility.
And for those of you that don't know, Hingham is actually going to be celebrating its 100th anniversary at the South Shore Country Club. It has been a country club for 100 years in 2022. So we've always sort of worked backwards from that date. So our goal would be to open up a new pool in 2022 and have a big celebration up at the country club. We'll have a new maintenance facility, turf care center, as well as a pool. And so the support that we're looking for is the approval of the design construction documents to get this process started. A lot of this has been difficult to get started because until you have that construction design money, it's difficult to hire someone to actually build a pool. And one of the things that we've done is we spent a lot of time looking at benchmark communities. Of our 19, there's 20 benchmark communities. Of the 19, 11 of them have municipal aquatic facilities. And of that 11, 7 of them are indoor-outdoor pools. And also, if you take a look at those benchmark communities, I think the average tax rate for benchmark communities is $13.51 per $1,000 of value. Hingham, I think, just switched to $11.53. So we have a good bang for our buck. But with all the other sort of competing projects that this town's going to be looking at, it would be nice to be able to maintain, I think, that lower $11.53 tax rate that's just based upon a residential tax rate. And CPC money is a nice way to do that because it's a pocket of money that's already been put aside for town projects that people have already paid for. And I think the taxpayer, I know myself as a taxpayer, I'd appreciate that because there will be other asks for our tax base to go up, such as a foster school, a fire station, a senior center, all of those types of things. So to me, as good stewards of the town and in my position as a CCMC member, I really think that is the best use for our dollars.
One of the things too is that, as an enterprise account, we are responsible for basically running it as a business and basically not being a burden to any of the taxpayers. And the golf course and the country club just can't afford to pay for the pool. We're paying for the maintenance facility and those items that are golf related. We're not able to take on the additional burden of the pool and paying for the capital improvements of the pool.
So that's an aerial shot of, just kind of a different view of what the country club looks like today and where the new proposed location would be. Next slide, Bill. So this is a picture of what we're proposing. That's okay. That's okay. Back one more. One more. One more. A lot of nice pictures of pools.
Going the wrong way.
That's okay.
You're going one more. Get one more.
Well, everyone's seeing our PowerPoint. Well, so a lot of these pictures are showing sort of what's existing and what's proposed. So this is the proposed pool. It's an 8-lane pool. It will have sort of a zero-depth entry. It will have locker rooms. It fits perfectly on that site. For if anyone who's been to the Weymouth Club, it's approximately the same size as the Weymouth Club pool. That's a year-round pool because they put a bubble over it.
And one of the things, too, we could work with the designers to ensure like the spray deck area would be able to be used in the shoulder season so that you could fence it off so that, you could have people come in like maybe earlier June before the lifeguards are on, or even like in September, people could use it and utilize it, because you'd have the bathrooms, you'd just have the pool area closed.
Okay, Bill, let's try for the next one. Other way.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, we can, these are the same slides that we've put before you. So if you think about the benefits to the town of Hingham, the country club services many town departments. We mow fields, we have a weather alert system. We partner with Hingham Recreation. For those people that aren't aware, the pool is actually run by Hingham Recreation. They run a huge number of camps, swimming lessons, swim team. There's pool memberships for over 200 families. It's a really great partnership between the country club and Hingham Recreation. So it really does benefit everyone in the town. SNAP runs a great program up there, which is the Special Needs Athletic Partnership. The country club, we do 30,000 rounds of golf annually. It's just a fantastic asset for the town of Hingham. So much so that there was even a Friends of the South Shore Country Club started up a few years ago, whose mission is basically to support capital projects that are identified by the country club management committee that we can't necessarily fit into our budget. So it truly is a town asset that needs some capital infusion. I think CPC dollars are sort of the best way to do that. And it's taken us a little time to get here, but I think this is the best project that we're going to put forth for the town. Without it, the town of Hingham will not have a municipal pool. And as an oceanfront community, I think that would be a real travesty. We're an athletic town. We're a well-run town. We should have a town pool, and we're asking for CPC dollars to help us get started on that avenue.
Questions from the committee? No?
The pool itself is gonna cost $7 million, approximately?
All in. So we've been comparing it to the Boulevard Pool in Canton quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so we think hard and soft costs, it'll probably come in a little bit less than $7 million. And typically, when we're looking at, and I'm going to let Kevin speak a little bit more to that because Kevin's got great background with the state. He ran the DCR pools for a number of years. About 10% of hard construction costs is about what you're going to pay for construction design docs, which is why we ended up with a...
Where does that money come from?
The money from,
The $7 million to build a pool?
we have a breakdown in your packet of what, like 5.3, but you're also gonna have, there's gonna be the demo of the existing pool and things of that nature. So you.
No,
I think you mean who's gonna pay for it?
No.
Oh, you're gonna say who's, okay.
I'm asking the wrong question, probably. Okay. We're gonna spend $500,000 for a plan.
Right.
For a pool.
Mhm.
But is there a guarantee the pool then gets built?
Well, then we would do the construction docs, and then we would come back to the annual town meeting in 2021 and ask for the construction funding of the pool.
Why wouldn't you ask for the full from the town?
Because
I mean, you're asking for a plan and saying, I really don't know the pool gets built, in which case the plan is useless.
Right. Well, I think
that's my concern, that to me it's one package.
Right. I think this was a direction in consultation with, the town leaders, that was the direction that we would go in. And I think for the most part, you know exactly what the construction number will be once you do the plans and you have the construction docs. I mean, design build, it gives you a year to put, to socialize it around the town to get exactly what everybody wants, and then move forward to a construction phase. I understand that town meeting could come back and say, we don't want to do it, but I think if town meeting does vote for the construction documents and the design documents, then, generally that is approval of kind of going forward and going to have the pool built in the long run.
Relatedly, if we didn't fund this, would you combine the $500,000 ask with the Turf Care Center warrant article? And basically go to town meeting directly now and ask for the $500,000 for the design?
No. And can I
Yeah, go ahead.
No, the answer would be no, because I think it's really two separate projects. And the other thing is, too, that we're commingling. What we're trying to do is make them individual, because as an enterprise account, the South Shore Country Club will be paying the debt service on the Turf Care Center. So we're going to be paying for anything related to the golf side of the business. I think this is, more of the recreation side of things, and that's why it would be two separate payments as far as two buckets of different payments of where the money's coming from to fund them. So we're going to be totally funding it through the South Shore Country Club, the Turf Care Center, and this would be funded by the town.
Because we really posed it, it's a town pool that happens to be located at the South Shore Country Club. And as an enterprise fund, we know that we don't have the cash flow to pay for the pool. We have the cash flow to pay for the golf, and the golf is really what generates the revenue at the country club. And so that's why they've been separated out. And to sort of, having been involved in town meeting for a long time, it's always been, from my perspective, that if you want an approval at town meeting, you have to go with a project that's been priced out. And we haven't been able to do that because we don't have the funding to hire someone to do those construction design docs, to price it out. So it's sort of what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And we haven't been able to access that very specific construction document without sort of paying for that construction document. We do have BH&A, was very helpful to us. They did the feasibility study, and they have given us, the cost estimates are in here. They're very interested in bidding on the project, but until we have that construction design money in hand, you really can't do anything. I also looked into some other towns. Cohasset just did a similar type of thing. They had $400,000 of CPC money. They have the Cohasset Swim Center, which has kind of fallen into disrepair. So it's not a new pool, but it's fixing up of the old pool. And of all those towns I mentioned, I didn't see one that didn't use CPC funds to pay for pools.
Excuse me. But the other thing, too, is that, when you do the design, you're going to be doing site work that would determine, like, whether you have ledge and things of that nature, would get you to a hard cost of exactly what it's going to cost, a lot closer. Where if you just went design build, then there could be a lot of unforeseen things that come up during the construction project that would cost a lot more money with, change orders and things of that nature during the construction project.
Great project, but I'm just concerned about the certainty of the bubble, because it referred to the bubble being designed to accommodate the bubble. Will that be subject to a later town meeting vote? Because to me, as a beach swimmer with no beach in the wintertime, the wintertime year-round pool is very appealing. Summertime, I go to the beach. I mean, that's a matter of personal preference. But this sounds as though the bubble is sort of a possibility, no longer part of the plan.
So
can it be made more sure?
Sure. So to answer your question, so we are building this as a seasonal pool that can accommodate a year-round bubble. And so, the reason that we're doing it that way is we look at the town has a town pool. So the town sort of owns the construction of a seasonal town pool. They don't have a year-round pool. So they look at sort of the year-round aspect as being more of a fundraising goal. And so to build it to accommodate a bubble is really the same way you're going to build it as a seasonal pool. And so what will happen is, if it gets approved as a seasonal pool, if people would like it to be a year-round pool, that would be more of a fundraising effort to be able to raise the dollars to operate it year-round, both operationally and for the capital to purchase and construct the bubble.
So it could be a while before we get the year-round pool.
It could be, or if people decide they
I'll
want
sign
it.
up for the fundraising. I mean, I think it's
Thank you.
maybe $10. Who knows? But no, I'm quite serious. It's
Yeah.
a wonderful thing every year. I've swum at the Newton North pool, which isn't lovely, but the fact is you can go out there and swim, or the MDC pool.
Right.
And if we can do better with the bubble that's translucent and very inviting, great.
Right.
But I hope it doesn't take years.
And the plan, Jim, originally was to build that year-round indoor-outdoor
once.
pool. But it was just cost prohibitive. It was too expensive. And we also have a survey as part of that feasibility study. 1,500 people said they would like a year-round facility. But typical, what happens a lot in towns is people want something, but when they realize how much they have to pay for it, you sort of end up with something in the middle, which is why we're presenting it the way that we are. So there's the option to do it year-round if people decide that that's what they would like to do.
It'll be designed to accommodate.
It
won't
will.
require
It
remodeling.
will. It'll be heated. Maybe we'll have a longer season. You might be able to open it in May, maybe close in September. So you can get a longer seasonal pool. And hopefully if people would like that year-round facility, that would be the fundraising effort, which I think will be easier because you can point to it and say, this is what it looks like. This is how much it's going to cost.
And it's adding to what you have. It's not losing
Exactly.
it. Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up, we have the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust with a request for $877,000.
Hi, thanks for having us. This is Britton DeBose, 19 Summit Drive, and Tim White, the head of the Affordable Housing Trust, and we're back tonight. Tim has a bit of an update to our story that we shared in the last time that we met, but our ask continues, no changes to that. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim. He's sharing some information that we've gathered from our work on the housing plan in the last month.
I think there's enough for everybody, but I'm not positive. Mr. Watson might be left short.
Yeah.
There you go. And what I'm handing out here is a preliminary draft of a housing study that we're doing collaboratively with a number of folks in town, representatives from planning, from housing authority, selectmen, and we may even have somebody from CPC on that too, I'm not sure. But it's a preliminary report, and two things what I would ask you to draw your attention to is, first, on page 5, the information you see in front of you is specific to Hingham. We have reached our 10% to satisfy the state as far as the General Laws Chapter 40B. But that doesn't mean we don't have a need for affordable housing in town. Hingham has approximately 8,800 households. You can see that approximately 30% of them, 2,000, almost 2,500 households, are spending too much on their housing. Too much on your housing means more than 30% of your income. That's the way they gauge it. And there's 17% with severe cost burdens, which is typically 50% of your income is going to your housing. So that's in our community. And just a good example of why we need additional affordable housing. And then, of course, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner with that beautiful little house there, the single-family average price here in Hingham is $813,000. That's something that is beyond the reach of a lot of our children, a lot of our seniors, and is something that results in a pressing need for additional affordable housing. The second thing that I want to bring to your attention to is that this housing study, which I would anticipate being done sometime this spring, and a full report will be provided, is that it was funded by you. It was funded by CPC. We were able to do this for the town because of monies paid to the trust by CPC. So for that, I say thank you.
Great, and do we want to talk about, we have looked at some historical data around CPC funding and the allocation of it to the different aspects of what you do, and we would like to continue to grow that focus in community housing. And I think over the past few years, we've been asking for incrementally more money as the organization, or the trust has really matured, our ability to really be active with that funding. So the ask this year, I think, just reflects our continued ability, hopefully, to invest in our community. So, questions?
Dan, did you have any questions? You're the liaison.
Yeah, I know you can't can't speak of specific projects necessarily, but could you give us a flavor of the types of uses of this money in
Sure. We can actually talk about some projects. I was here in Town Hall on Tuesday night before the Zoning Board of Appeals in respect to a request for a variance for our project up on Whiting Street. It's actually a project we're partnering with Habitat for Humanity. And the Habitat for Humanity can do so much. They require anybody who's going to be able to live there to put their sweat equity into it. They reach out to the community to have volunteers to do a lot of the work, but of course there are significant expenses in building 2 houses. And so we will assist them with that with our opportunity funding. And like anything else, you don't know what the need is going to be until it actually is presented in a more of a final form when the project is completed or the planning for the project is completed. And as we're going through this process, we're learning that the town may want to see sidewalks out in front of Whiting Street. Well, that's an additional expense, and a significant one. And that's something that we as a trust would be looking to assist Habitat with if needed. Secondly, one thing I know that CPC is always looking to hear is that we're not solely dependent upon CPC funding to do our projects, and I'm delighted to report today that this afternoon I was down at Brockton City Hall along with Emily Wentworth receiving a $140,000 housing grant from the state of Massachusetts that we will use to renovate and upgrade the properties at Road Circle that we purchased in the last year. And again, that purchase was with funds from CPC. Again, I say thank you. But to get this grant of $140,000, because it's a 2-family house, it's going to need a lot of work to get it up to speed so that it can be purchased or rented by qualifying folks that are obviously qualifying because they are below the median income. I think it's pretty exciting. It's the first grant we've received, but it opens the door to additional ones down the road, and so there's a couple of examples.
Can I just ask, on the last page, there's percentage of what was paid toward community housing, but I can't really read. I can't figure out which one is community housing.
10%.
10%, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't do it in color.
With all the paperwork, your application is still on the dining room table. Something got lost in the shuffle. But I was going through all the line items that you had to get to 877, and 2 of them were not specifically about buying property. One was for $150,000 to fix up a property, I forget which, and one was for $52,000 to help a property be in better shape. And neither one of those, I guess, is the Road Circle one.
The 152 is the money that we put a placeholder in for renovation, repair, legal support, and a LIP application for the Road Circle property, which is what.
LIP application, okay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Which is the one that we now received a $140,000 grant for.
So wouldn't that take your ask down 140? Because some of you were asking for money for the same thing.
Right. If we were going to dedicate it strictly to that, but understanding that the general request here is what we call an opportunity funding, and that additional opportunities always come up. And a perfect example is, and additional expenses come up. We did not put a placemat for any additional costs at Whiting Street. And I have no idea what a sidewalk costs, but it's something that we're going to probably need to fund, and we will need funds to do that. So the need is there. It's not.
Right. I just have a little confusion, and it may be my misunderstanding. When I think of the Opportunity Fund, I think of a fund to purchase property, to purchase real estate, if something should come on the market and you need to move fast. And for the 152 for the Road Circle property, and I think 50 was to fix up the place on Main Street. There was, what? There was 50,000 to.
Say 50,000?
Yeah. What was that?
That was committed to Father Bills as part of an agreement we made with
Okay.
them.
In my head, I'm not translating those as opportunity funds to buy property so that people who wouldn't otherwise be able to live in Hingham could live here. So I'm just having trouble with that 202,000 as an ask for your opportunity fund. And especially because you now got 140.
Right, but had we not got the 140, it's still, the category it fits under is the opportunity funding, because in order to get that property up to snuff, you make the purchase knowing that they're gonna have to put some additional work into it. We can't purchase properties at $113,000 that are, market rate properties that are ready to be move-in condition. It just doesn't happen.
Okay, I hear you, and just to keep pushing back, you have two other funds within HAHT, right? And one is a general fund, and I forget what the other one is. But so the
Lincoln School.
What?
Lincoln School?
Oh, the other one is
Yeah,
just Lincoln
that's
School.
totally separate.
So the money for fixing up can't come from the general fund?
It can, but our general fund is obviously limited.
Yeah.
And the goal of the general fund is also to use it for funds that would not, like CPC funds are restricted. So that there's certain things we can't, for example, we couldn't do certain repairs to Lincoln School apartments unless it fits the safety, or, there are restrictions. So that's what the kind of monies the purposes that we use the general fund for, where the opportunity fund is clearly to create additional housing, and whether it's purchase or renovation, I would not distinguish that.
Make it livable.
Absolutely positive.
And I'll just point out that we actually just borrowed money from that general fund to cover the gap that we had in the opportunity fund in order to purchase the two properties at Road Circle.
143,000.
There you go.
Remember the
Yep,
number.
yeah.
Okay, thanks. Vicki?
Lots of in and out.
I mean, I know government works slowly, and I want to ask this correctly, but Whiting Street was CPC project probably about 5 years ago. And so are you telling us that any sidewalks in front of that property are coming out of the affordable, I don't understand. Loads of houses don't have sidewalks in town. Why would that, I don't understand why that would.
It's coming out of, first off, I don't know that they're gonna be required. I wanna be very clear on that. But, when you go to zoning looking for a variance, all the town departments weigh in. One of the departments that weighed in on this is the Hingham Police Department. One of their concerns was the need for sidewalks.
I mean, again, it's affordable housing, it's on Whiting Street. We've spent years talking about this project. Habitat for Humanity is doing the project. Anybody who knows Whiting Street, if you've seen this property, the property was given. The idea that the town would ask CPC or affordable housing to put a sidewalk in when lots of homes don't,
Well, the town's not.
I find that
The town's not asking CPC or the trust. What I'm saying to you is that if that means that this project's gonna sink.
It's way back.
It is way back, yeah, well, yeah.
There's a general move to get
Sidewalks on Whiting Street.
Whiting Street,
No,
because
I
it's,
understand that.
there are a lot of people who live there who want sidewalks there, so I don't think the town is saying, well, you have to put in a sidewalk.
Right.
There's a general effort
Yep.
to get sidewalks on Whiting Street for
This is just-
safety reasons, and so it's not.
Right.
I'd like to think
It's
it
not
doesn't come out.
pinpointed
No,
at
no,
that.
no, I understand that. I'd just like to think it doesn't come out of the affordable. These houses are way set back. And this is a project that's
Right,
about
but
5
people
years
walk
old.
along the street
No,
and
no,
it's
I
not
understand.
safe.
No, I get it.
So,
Other questions of Jim? Just speak right into the mic.
Nice going as always, juggling so much. But is there any chance to get another unit on Whiting Street? Since originally there was the going to be possibly of two. And if the present one is set so far back, is there room in between to better justify the sidewalk?
We're building two, Jim.
You are building two.
We are building two.
One where the old house
We're
was.
proposing to build two. That's what the variance seeks.
Okay, one where the old house was and one in the middle? Or on the front?
Sort of, yes. I mean, there is one, Vicki, just so you know, that the plan is to have one a little bit closer to the road. Yeah. We'll demolish the one that exists there. And, well, we can't go anywhere until we get a permit, so. Yeah.
I'll just say, Jim, that you may also be thinking about the Cushing Street property, which is one that we purchased 2 years ago. And we're still working on the possibility of building
Building a second
another
house
house. So using one property with one house on it to add another house, to really seize the
That's
full
good.
opportunity there.
That's good to hear, yeah.
Yeah.
Because originally I was very enthusiastic about Whiting Street, thinking of keeping the old house and doing one in the middle and one in the frontage. And that sort of evolved away.
Well, we put a request in for 3 houses, but it settled on 2, and we're delighted to be proceeding with 2.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that concludes the presentations. I just want to discuss a subject which is not on the agenda, which is our voting. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be sending the committee the Excel spreadsheets that you put your preliminary numbers in. And I'll give a whole explanation of the sheet and different things on it and how you fill it out. And you'll send it back to Sharon Perfetti, not to me, because I don't want to see it, nor should I see it before I put my own numbers in. And then when we meet next week to vote our final recommendations, what we'll do is we'll see where there's a majority agreement on any of the items, and where at least 5 people have come up with the same number, we should silo those and say, okay, we have a majority, we're good. And where there's disagreement is where the bulk of the discussion could come, going back and forth. And it would be good if we came to a consensus, meaning at least 5 of us coming to feel the same way about the same number, rather than averaging out 9 different numbers. The problem is when you average out 9 numbers, they could be all over the place. 3 people or maybe even 4 people might be on the same number, and then the rest is a ping pong ball. So it doesn't really represent the feeling of the committee to just say, well, we're going to average all the numbers. So that's what I'm hoping for, that we arrive at a majority consensus for all of the items. What, Jim?
I said, we don't know until we expand our responses. We don't know until we compare our responses.
What will happen when we meet next week? So first we're going to discuss eligibility of the Benjamin Lincoln statue, and we'll take a vote on that. And then after that, Heidi will take the minutes, and she'll have on an overhead projector all of our names mushed together across the top, and the projects on the bottom, and we'll all see what we preliminarily thought for each project. And by the way, when you get your Excel spreadsheet, it looks like only Kevin, Vicky, and Bill are listed because their last names end with B, D, and H, but you have to press your right arrow to go over to find your own name in there. Jim, I lost your question. Yeah, then we keep going back and forth. And what will happen in real time as we change our numbers and arrive at consensus? And by the way, as you're filling out your things, there'll be the total at the bottom that we're allowed to give, and you'll see your own numbers totaling and changing as you go along and kind of erasing what you did and redoing, and you'll see if you've gone over, and you'll see if you're under. And you may want to go under. You may want to say, no, we want to hold some in reserve. You just can't go over. But in real time, you'll see that as you go. And then as we all work together, where it's all mushed together, all of us are mushed together in one document, Heidi will be showing it in real time as we make the changes.
Can I make a suggestion? I think that the preliminary vote should be just a starting point for our discussion. And I think it may make sense to have like a spreadsheet with like 9 columns for each of us, we can see, and then have a 10th column where you kind of do the 5th highest for each project, which would mean like the majority. But let's say like 4 people wanted 100 and 5 wanted, the 5th wanted 50 and 4 wanted 0. The majority of the board was for 50 or more, so it'd be 50 in that column. And that column would be less than the total amount available, by definition, because it would be majority of the board. But it wouldn't be binding to anyone. We could decide to have 0 for that project or 100 for that project.
I lost.
I think the problem with, I hear what you're saying, I think it doesn't work because depending upon what other people have done with other numbers, those numbers would never work. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, I think if you did the 5th highest for each project, if you added them up, it'd be less than the total amount available.
What do you mean by the 5th highest?
Well, if you would take 9 people and you added and you put them in order for each project of the highest to the lowest,
the
5th person let's say there's 4 with 100, 1 with 50, and 4 with 0. That means the majority of the board wants 50 or more, so you could say the majority at least wants 50 on that project. And then you could, for each project, that column would be less than the total ask, or maybe it would be equal, but it wouldn't be higher.
Okay.
It would just be a way to start the discussion. It wouldn't be binding.
You mean on things that were not automatically agreed on? Because on the things that were automatically agreed on, I want to silo, on things that we come in with a consensus of 5 or more, I want to silo those. You mean the things that we don't have 5 people saying the same?
Let's say there were asked for 100, and 4 were for 100, 1 was for 75, and.
Okay, so we don't have a majority. So you're saying, let's say there's a project where there's not a majority.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking maybe just a starting point, because I could be, let's say I say 100 for a project, then I listen to other people and say, you know what, you're right, I don't want to give any money for that. But it would just be a way to start the discussion with us being able to view what the majority of the board.
Well, they're all gonna be up
is
there
looking
anyway,
for.
right? They're all gonna be up there anyway.
We're all going to be up there.
Okay.
The other problem is, I spent a good deal of time reconstructing the Excel spreadsheet with Sharon today because our administrator of many years is no longer here, and so it's done.
I would just remind, so that new people who don't know, there are, 3 things that you really have no choice over, and they're in the Excel spreadsheet, which are Laner and Heritage, and the minimum for housing. So it doesn't mean you can't give more, but you can't give less.
Right. The only one we have absolutely no choice on is the Heritage Museum, because it's the last payment, so we can't pay more and we can't pay less. You can, for housing, there has to be a minimum of 169.3, but you can go over. And for Laner, there has to be a minimum of 356, and you can go over. But actually, that's a good point, Vicki, because when you get your Excel spreadsheets tomorrow, and as I said, you're going to see your totals changing as you go, you're all going to have a total of 133 in your column, because you've already voted 133 for the Heritage Museum. You don't have a choice on that. So don't be confused when you see 133 in the Heritage Museum line and then see 133 in the total. That just means it's your total so far because you haven't voted anything else yet.
Question for the newbie, in that you said in the total in the bottom you can't go over. However,
You can go over. Oh, in terms of like if you wanted to bond
Yes.
something. Then go over. Yeah, the number will still show up.
You can go over?
Yeah, then the higher number, I think it might be in a parentheses to show as a minus or something like that, but yes, you can go over.
Okay.
In fact, thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to talk about bonding. So some of your packet, most of what,
Before we go to bonding.
yeah,
I'm just gonna throw out, I think this may be somewhat what Bill was saying, is last year what we did is, as we discussed it, we sort of built consensus on a number of areas, and if you have, even if we just torpedo, say, my category, and we use it to create a consensus category, what we ended up doing is we ended up getting everybody to, yeah, I can live with that, and by the time we were done, we said, okay, we all agree on that silo. And I don't know if that's what you're trying to say, but it would be nice if on the Excel, and I'm happy to sacrifice, since mine's one of the first seen, if it ends up being the clean slate that we can all say, yeah, we all agree, let's do that, we all agree, let's do
Is
that.
there a column for the decision?
at the end there's a final, but what you're saying, Kevin, will happen not going down, but going across. So in other words, there's going to be 10 projects going down on the left. Let's say one project is fixing the historic doors in this room, and they want $75,000. You will see going across right away if at least 5 people have voted 75 or 50 or 25 or whatever it is. So you'll see at a glance whether there's consensus, just going across rather than down. Okay?
Can I ask a question too before the bonding? On that vote about the eligibility of the statue, I am new this year, and I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful just for the record, for the public's information, for my information, just to go down the list of projects that we're considering at the outset and just say, this one is eligible under this bucket. We have 3 buckets. This one's eligible under this bucket for this reason, just to reinforce kind of all the reasons why every project should be looked at with that lens. For example, the programmatic kind of planning at the harbor, is planning eligible and why? That's a question that I have. So I just think that it would be worth, in that initial thing, is to just quickly go down that and make sure everybody agrees on why each project is eligible. That seems to be a big concern.
I'm not opposed to that, Judy, and in fact, there are metrics in our guidelines on the site, but I would leave that to the majority. It's going to make it a longer night, which is okay with me. If your fellow members...
Maybe I'll do the list and just pass it around to everyone and say, is this right? If you're concerned with the amount of time that it takes, I think it's important, if we're considering one project's eligibility, that we consider all the projects' eligibility.
I'm not concerned about the time. I'd kind of like to hear what the committee at large feels, if they want to go through that of the metrics, and is this eligible and why?
I like that.
Others? Not so much.
I feel that should happen in August, but that's the whole point of the early, and I think it's difficult this year. We haven't had an administrator, we haven't had, the kind of help we've had in the past, where those kinds of questions really got answered very early on. But I have no problem with having that conversation.
Yeah, I guess my concern is, I think we believe that the other projects is no question. And if a question arose, we really wouldn't give the applicant a fair opportunity to address that, then what would we do? So I'm not totally against it, but I think it's almost too late to address that. At least with respect to the statute, the applicant knows we've given him a chance to address that issue, so I think it's fair.
The whole purpose of the early application in August is for eligibility. So, this is a different case. And I'm not separating this because I think it is very late in the game. So I totally hear your concern. It's the first time it's ever happened since 7 years that I've been here. So, but I don't see opening up all the other applications in that way. But I certainly think this, is an issue.
Here's another way to look at it, Judy. So as the ones that we're don't have a majority consensus on, we're going to talk about why we think more should be given or less should be given. And what we can bring in there are the metrics from the guidebook saying, this is why this is so eligible, this is why this has incredible importance, and that kind of comes into the discussion organically.
That's a good point.
Could you live with that?
I can. I'm going to go down through the metrics and do it. And if I have any questions, I will present the question.
And I do want to make a distinction. There's eligibility, and then there's metrics of how important this is, how easily it fits in. But it is all part of the same diagram.
And my second question has to do with these. We have 3 buckets, for lack of a better word: historic, housing, and conservation. Have we met? Do Laner and the museum meet our requirements in the 2 other buckets, and that's why the housing is the only one with the minimum?
Not exactly, but almost. So Laner meets our requirement for open space. This year, the Heritage Museum does not meet our requirement. Our requirement, the 10% requirement, comes to 169.3. The Heritage Museum is 133. It does not meet that requirement. I am assuming that between the Benjamin Lincoln House and the cemetery and the church steeple,
we'll get 37.
The statue is not historic preservation. That's rec. And rec doesn't have a 10% minimum. You can do any 0 or whatever.
So recreation's a 4th, not part of open space.
Recreation doesn't have to get 10%.
Okay.
No, or open space either.
Right.
Yeah.
Just housing.
No, open space does.
Open space, but it's part of a recreation. It's open space and recreation. They're not four. They're not 4. You said 4.
Are they separate?
No, they're the same.
It's 3 separate categories. Rec is kind of a subhead of open space.
That's what I just meant. It's not a 4th
that was my
bucket.
understanding.
It's
So the 10% is open space.
Larry, you may know better than I. I thought the statute was amended to add rec, but they didn't, when they did it, they didn't add the 10% to that.
Right, because they added rec as like, you know, point A under open space. It's not, it's, for the 10%, that's where, yeah, that's what it's all about. Yeah, rec doesn't have a minimum. Open space, historic preservation, and affordable, and community, they call it community housing, but they mean affordable housing. Okay. So are we ready to just talk about bonding for a few minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so I see what Deirdre gave us is how we might bond the house, paying down paying down some of it and then bonding some of it over 20 years. And what you also have in your packets, after the first page with the yellow and green, I gave you scenarios of what it would take to bond our 3 most expensive asks over 10 years. 2 over 10 years and 1 over 5. So I did the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust, $877 over 10 years. I did the Benjamin Lincoln House, $972 over 10 years. And I did the pool construction documents, $500,000 over 5 years, because you're not allowed to do we're not allowed to bond that out for longer than 5 years. I learned this from Gene Montgomery the other day, so that's why that one is only 5 years and not 10 years.
Larry, do you have paper for this?
You have it in your packet.
I don't know if I have a packet.
I gave you, is it under your agenda?
Check right there.
It's there.
Okay,
If you don't have it,
Oh, right,
there you go.
thank you.
So there's 100 ways you can do this. We can recommend to bond something for 20 years. We can recommend to bond something for 10 years. We can recommend to bond something for 5 years. We can recommend to pay for some of it up front and bond the rest, which is what Deirdre's letter is saying. And the first page I gave you is what we have left on the Laner land. Because after, like next year when CPC meets, we will not have to put aside money for the Heritage Museum. We just have the Laner land left. And I see it as a bit of a breather, but not an incredible breather because we're here until 2036, paying over $300,000 a year, then going down to over $200,000 a year on the Laner land debt. So I'm anxious about, even though interest rates are good now, I personally am anxious about bonding because there's going to be a lot of singularly worthy products over the next 10 years, over the next 20 years. And if we keep chipping away at bonding, what we're doing is limiting future community preservation committees about how much they have to spend on projects. And so if we're $50,000 a year on this incredibly great project and $75,000 a year on that great project, we're quickly eating away. So I want to ask you to think about that fact that it's a very slippery slope, in my opinion, to bond. I'm not saying we should never do it. Never is a kind of puts a chokehold on you. There could be instances where it's the right thing to do, but it makes me nervous because it hamstrings the present committee and committees for years to come.
But now and then there's a project that just comes once.
Now and then there is,
Yeah.
and if there are 5 of those projects over 10 years or 20 years, we're really in the
It's all
soup.
gone, yeah.
So
The pool has to be bonded if it was to be bonded for 5 years? Is that what you said?
the pool construction so the pool construction documents, if we decided to bond them, yes, we could not go longer than 5 years on that.
Is there a reason why?
It's a law. I don't know why it is, but it was explained that design construction, you just can't get the borrowing at this great rate.
Maybe because it's not an asset.
Maybe, I don't know. Gene Montgomery said it, so I believe it. Other questions or thoughts about this? Kevin?
You've expressed sort of understandably a reluctance to bond. Is there anywhere that we have any guidelines as to why or when we should bond, or what circumstances would qualify as an extraordinary project that we would say, yeah, this is one that we should bond and here because it meets these guidelines?
That's a really good question. The bonding happened because there were some people on a Community Preservation Committee years ago who were very enthusiastic about the Heritage Museum. And that was the first bonding, and it was said, we're never going to bond again. And then the Laner land came along. It's just, it keeps, there's no guidance. There's no guideline. Some communities never bond. That's a good point.
I mean, I tend to agree with your thought of, we shouldn't be spending all the money now and locking it up in the future. And then we've all been hearing about, the Benjamin Lincoln House being a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity or once-in-a-400-year opportunity.
It is. It's actually a once-and-forever opportunity. It's not even a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But with that, one of the metrics, if you look in the book, is can the project, we kind of have to think, what is the least amount of money that CPC could contribute that the project can happen? It's very much about how do we stretch our dollars the best. So that's important to keep in mind as you think about bonding. If I guess, let's just say there's a project and we all think it's terribly important, and I actually think there is a project and we all think it's terribly important. I think we need to think about, could this happen without bonding, even if it would be financially uncomfortable for the applicant? That's kind of a metric in the CPA guidelines. Others, thoughts or opinions or no? Okay. Then you'll get your Excel spreadsheets. What? Oh, Dot. Please come to the microphone.
Dorothy Gallo, excuse me, 1 Volunteer Road. I'm on the board of the Historical Society. I have prior experience as a superintendent of schools, so very familiar with bonding for lots and lots of projects. And with respect to bonding for this project or any other project that would potentially be a large number, if there's not a willingness to consider bonding as an option, as you deliberate about not just our project, obviously, but others, then you almost never can entertain a large project. Because in the year that a large project comes forward, there's never going to be enough money in the pool that you have to allocate. And so what happens then is, if it's not over your total cap, then you would have to fund that project and the several, however many there are in the given year that are statutory. But you could never entertain a large project, which would be a shame, without then saying in that year, well, the other 8 or the other 9 or however many there are just get nothing. That's just a reality with big projects. On the other hand, bonding sometimes can be helpful if you have a large number of smaller projects, and bond all of them to get all of those funded and on their way, and not waiting for a chance when you can slide in a $50,000 project or a 40 or whatever. And I'm not an expert on bonding, but I've been to a number of workshops where, in a community like ours, where we have a AAA bonding situation, and where we have low interest rates and so on. There are a number of communities. I've done a lot of recent research on the CPC Coalition site about projects in other communities, and many of them use bonding. In fact, a couple of communities bond almost everything because they see that as a better way to leverage their money and be able to keep a lot of projects in flow. And rewriting, bonds. Don't bond for 20 years. Bond for a shorter period of time. So there are lots of opportunities, and I guess I would ask that the committee, all of you as individuals, look at the benefits of bonding and the many ways to do that. We have a lot of people in town that are very knowledgeable about bonding. At another meeting earlier, I spoke about Jim Taylor, who, former chair of advisory, kind of the local expert in bonding these kinds of things, and I think he was involved in the Laner and the museum projects, who are, very knowledgeable and can give you some options. So I would urge all of you to look at bonding for what it can do, not just for our project, but for your projects as you move forward. It's a tool, and you're right that it would be good if there were very specific guidelines. I do believe that selectmen are very knowledgeable about bonding and see that as an alternative for certain projects. I won't speak for them, obviously, but I would say the same thing about our advisory committee, that these are people that look at that as a tool. And obviously, looking at it as a tool and looking at it from your preferences in terms of what projects you think are the most important to fund for this year, those are two different parameters. But we feel strongly that, and I, as a person and as a citizen, feel strongly that if we're not willing to bond, then none of us would ever have homes and so on, and not to think of bonding as you think of your mortgage. And I think that that's what people tend to do. Oh my gosh, all my money's going to be tied up for 30 years, and I won't be able to do anything else, and so on. To look at it as a tool that you would use differently to fund projects than the way that you bond your house, so to speak. So.
We appreciate your comments, Dot. And
on the other topic that you were talking about, the eligibility, I do think it's important that everybody feels they're treated, fairly. And are we just looking at one committee and saying, well, it doesn't look like they're eligible? Does the committee have the flow chart? Because it strikes me that, as Judy talked about putting together the list, if everybody could,
August. That's the whole purpose of preliminary applications, and we've always done that. And eligibility is decided in the August meeting. So this is the first time
that this
has ever happened. I mean, I've never seen this happen. The one other thing I just want to say to the committee, because I've been on this committee for 7 years, and in past years, sometimes we've asked people to wait a year, and things change. Sometimes they don't come back. Something else happens. It changes something. So, and I'm not suggesting we don't support different projects, but I mean, it's not as if every project doesn't get funded that we didn't do our jobs. I think that it's a big decision. We have to really look at every project separately, decide in our best, and that's what we're all here for, to do the best we can do with the projects at hand. But I'm one who doesn't believe in splitting the baby either, because I don't think that helps anybody. So I think that we all have to look to ourselves and say, sprinkling little bit everybody doesn't necessarily help either, and sometimes the project can come back a following year. So, and I'm not talking about any particular one, I just say that has happened over the years. So.
Shouldn't we be able to assume that most projects that got this far are eligible?
I'm sorry, what?
Shouldn't we be able to assume that most projects that got this far are eligible?
I believe
that's the process.
I believe that most of the projects are eligible. I don't believe that one is eligible, but we're going to hash that out next week, and we'll
it shouldn't be a minefield of uncertainty. We should know.
Hopefully, the town council will get back to us.
They have not weighed in as of yet.
So when I think I said at last night's meeting that I had phoned twice and emailed 3 times, and when I got home, town council emailed me at about 6:45. I had already left and said, "I'm just getting to this now. I have." Town council has not yet offered a legal opinion on this, and I wrote back and I said, I know we would really like one, and we feel, the committee feels it needs that guidance, and officials at Town Hall were copied on that email by town council and then by me, and I asked, and I said, I don't think we as a committee can demand a legal opinion, but we would very much appreciate one, because it would help us make this decision, but I haven't heard back from anyone yet.
This is eligible until we're told it isn't, because as far as I'm concerned, they were eligible in August. I felt they've been eligible. They've been asked all the questions.
What project are you talking about?
I'm still talking about Benjamin Lincoln statue. Up until you're given the word, I mean, because they were found to be eligible. They've done everything we've asked. They've gone to the selectmen. So, again, you've had a new conversation with CPA, but I think town council needs to weigh in, and I think for those of us around the table to feel anything other than we've been going through the process since day one.
Okay, well, hopefully.
I mean, I think that's the fair way to go forward.
You're entitled to your opinion,
Right, no,
but we're going to make this decision formally next Wednesday.
Right.
But to get back to bonding, Dot, I want to assure you that no one at the table, including I, who feel very cautious, is suggesting that we shouldn't consider bonding. You even had one committee member say, can we go above the total? So people are considering bonding. You shouldn't worry that anyone here is saying bonding is never. Never is a dangerous word. So don't worry about that. Bonding is always a consideration. Okay. Yeah. Any
Always is never. Oh, which way is it? Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.